everyone, welcome back to the next segment of AWS On Air. We are live from Las Vegas, Nevada at the Venetian for reInvent 2022. I'm one of your co-hosts, Jeff Mershak. I'm a senior solutions architect with our DoD Air Force team, and I'm joined by my co-host, Steve. And Steve, I gotta say, earlier off stage, I was looking at your awesome shirt, and then
Nice, huh?
all of a sudden a 3D image of an AWS outpost. It was like one of those 3D things. That's a really cool shirt, man.
Well, I decided to take inspiration from the AWS Arts thing that we did yesterday afternoon with the graffiti, audio graffiti. I'm like, yeah, this will do the job nicely. Anyway, yeah. So I'm Steve Roberts, developer advocate for .NET and PowerShell at AWS. And for this segment, we're joined by Justin.
Hi.
Please introduce yourself.
Hi,
Tell
my name is
what
Justin. I am the general manager for AWS Step Functions.
Awesome. All right.
So step functions is one of those kind of core functions we all learn about, but let's set the stage for our viewers. Let's go over exactly what step function is what customers use them for.
Got it. So step functions is a workflow service, and so workflows are a way for you to take a set of discrete units, order them together in a way that fulfills what your application needs to do. And so step functions is also a visual workflow service. And so one of the nice properties of that is it allows you to define your workflows using our Amazon States language, and you can do that visually using a tool that we call the Workflow Studio, or you can do it through writing code in the CDK. But you get visual representations of what your application is going to do. And you can see visual views of what the application did do when it's running. And this really helps when you're operating at large scale. The ability to compose these different code that you write and deploy in Lambda functions, in Fargate, AWS services, and to compose those all into cloud applications is really what step functions helps you do.
So these are like state machines, right? With steps, conditions, decision trees, etc.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty cool. So we're used to using those for processing data sets or input data, making decisions which tree it's going to go down. How would I have handled, say, large data sets? What have we done? I did there.
Yeah, so a lot of people use event-driven flows for their data processing, and so they may have files that get dropped into S3. They trigger using Amazon Event Bridge to call a state machine, and maybe they have that state machine that processes multiple steps, a few Lambda functions, does some things in parallel, and then carries on. And so that works really well. But sometimes you want to process discrete data sets. Maybe you want to do reprocessing of a large set that you had before, or there's a need for you to do it all at once. And customers do that with step functions, but what they've had to do before today is they've had to build a lot more of that orchestration into their workflows themselves, break them up into separate pieces, have those call each other, and we had a lot of customers doing this, and we looked at it and said, we think we can do a lot better here.
All right, well, so tell us what was recently announced.
Yeah, so what we just announced today, and Werner mentioned in the keynote today, is what we call distributed map. So prior to this, we have what we call a map state, which allows dynamic parallelism. So in your workflow, you can pass in an array of items, and you can have a sub-workflow that's called an item processor. And AWS Step Functions will execute a sub-workflow for each one of those. Prior to this, it would happen within one workflow execution, so it was kind of limited in how it could scale. Now we've made this a lot easier. For first, you can source those items from S3. You can list objects that are available in S3. You can also reference a file that contains an array, either in JSON or a list in CSV. So this makes it a lot easier to access your data. Then when those workflow executions are kicked off, we do them in separate workflow executions. So we distribute that across this system. This allows it to run at much higher scale. Previously with our inline map, you can run about 40 in parallel.
Right.
With distributed map, you can run up to 10,000.
Wow.
Okay. And then when these workflows complete, then they can write the results back to S3. And so you can leave that processing in your sub-workflows and your Lambda functions and allow your parent workflow to continue on.
Cool. So do I need to learn a new framework to use this?
No, you just use the code that you've written. If you have code that you've written, you deploy in Lambda that processes an object or a set of objects in S3, you can just take that and you can apply that to millions of objects without needing to learn any other new frameworks. So this is very helpful. A lot of our customers have embraced the serverless approach. They use Lambda to run and deploy their code, and so this allows them to reuse their same skill set. It's also really helpful when they have code already that maybe they're using in an API processing one of these items. They can reuse that same code and use it for large-scale batch processing, and it really simplifies the work that they need to do.
So can I use, or can a customer use this new parallel feature for anything other than data processing?
Yeah, for sure. So there can be other scenarios where maybe you have you use our new feature that we launched recently for cross-account integrations.
All right.
This new feature we launched a couple of weeks ago allows you to have each step in your workflow, your task, assume a role into another account. Many of our customers use multi-account architectures. So you might use this to get a list of all the accounts that your organization is managing and take action across all of them, to do that in parallel and to control the concurrency with which you access.
This is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to wrap my head around the idea of like 10,000 parallel workflows running in step function.
Yeah, because sometimes you hear of like Lambda armies, like a
Yeah,
fan-out type
fan-out.
of thing to
Yes.
handle a big thing. But now you can maybe use that same approach with step functions.
Yeah, so you're using that with Lambda, and this ability to fan out and then fan back in.
Yep.
It makes that just a lot easier. And because if you're trying to write that code yourself in your Lambda functions, maybe building some other system in order to orchestrate it, it's just a lot of work on your part. And so you can use step functions. You can also take advantage of a lot of the other features that step functions has. So the visual builder workflow studio is really helpful for seeing your architecture, how it works. We also have integrations with over 220 services, over 10,000 API actions. So any service effectively in AWS, you can compose it with your Lambda functions.
Yep.
You may find that you use Fargate, you can use that as well. And so it gives you a lot of flexibility. Earlier today, Werner was talking about building evolvable architectures, and building in this way allows you to have that flexibility.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of builders watching right now. Where would you tell someone who wants to learn more about this new feature? Where would they go to get started?
Yeah, so I would go to a site called Serverless Land. And if you look up on Serverless Land, we have something called the Workflows Collection. And it's really a fantastic thing our developer advocate group put together. On there, you'll see a set of patterns that you can use to get started, to understand types of workflows that you can build. And you'll see lots of those that you can then take them, deploy them using SAM, using CDK, and using Terraform. You'll also see on there a link to the Step Functions workshop. I would highly recommend everyone who wants to understand step functions to go and take this. The team that built this has done a fantastic job. It allows you to understand what step functions is, the core features of it. Being a very versatile service, there's a lot to learn, and it's a really, really great thing, and it's publicly available. Anyone can go and do it whenever they would like.
Yeah, it seems like step functions is limited to your imagination.
Yeah.
You can,
Yes.
there's the typical use cases you hear about it. Sometimes you get limited to just thinking in that way, but it's really up to you what you can use it for.
Yeah, very flexible. And we've talked a lot about the data processing scenarios that a lot of our customers use. But we also have, with our Express workflows, we have the ability to use it to orchestrate your API actions behind API Gateway. We have a synchronous version of Express workflows where you can take your Lambda functions and call them from behind this, and therefore you can take advantage of things like the dynamic parallelism, that you can make this work a lot more quickly, and you don't have to put all of that orchestration into your Lambda functions.
So you mentioned Express workflows there.
Yeah.
Can you just explain a little bit about what those are?
Yeah, sure. So standard workflow, we have two types of workflows, standard workflows and express workflows. Standard workflows have an at most once execution model, meaning they'll make sure that they don't call the tasks in your workflow more than once. And this is really important when you're doing things, say actions that are going to be expensive or destructive if you repeat them. They run for up to a year. And they're built on a per state transition basis. And so one of the things they're actually great for is scenarios where your workflow actually needs to wait for a long time. So you can have something that starts up, does some action, and then maybe it needs to wait for a while. It
So
also
wait for maybe somebody to confirm an action or some
So
external system?
Correct. So you can go through and maybe you're doing some processing and then you need a confirmation from a human that something needs to go. So you can then pause that by sending a token off to an SQS queue, and when that processing happens later, it comes back and then it can continue. And so standard workflows is really fantastic for that. There are other scenarios where you want to process a lot of stuff really quickly, and that's where Express workflows comes into play. They run up to 5 minutes. They're they're built on a Lambda-like model where per execution and duration, and they have an at least once execution model. And so for item-potent processing of events, they're really, really fantastic.
Right, so we're getting low on time. Is there anything that you want to leave our viewers with that maybe we missed?
Yeah, I think I would just reiterate what we talked about earlier. Go check out Serverless Land Workflows Collection. Go check out the Step Functions Workshop. It's really, really helpful to give you a lay of the land, understand what you can do, and achieve what you said, which is, making your imagination the limit.
Yeah, great. So Steve, Justin, thanks for joining us for this session. This sounds great. Everyone go check out the new feature of step functions. And this has been AWS On Air. We're going to take a quick break before our next segment. So